Welcome to the Swine Health Black Belt Podcast, the latest swine health research digested for you. My name is Dr. Clayton Johnson, your host for today's episode. Joining me on today's episode is Dr. Guilherme Preis. Dr. Guilherme is a DVM from Brazil who's currently finishing his Ph.D. in veterinary medicine at the University of Minnesota. He is working in the field of epidemiology of swine disease with a focus on Senecavirus A. Welcome to the podcast, Guilherme.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, for having me here. And pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, would you like to give the audience a brief background about yourself and what kind of brought you to your current role in trying to achieve your PhD?
So I was born in Brazil. My dad is a hog producer, so that's how I got into the swine business. And then so that's where I got my DVM degree back in Brazil in 2014, where I worked for a swine producing company for 4 years and a half. And then I came here in 2018 to get my PhD. So that's been very, very quickly. That's how I ended up here.
Very good. Thank you for that. Guilherme, you have recently published some work on evaluating different sample types for Senecavirus A. Could you talk to our audience a little bit about what sample types are possible to collect to test for Senecavirus A, and which sample types in specific have you been evaluating in your research?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's good that we know the answer to that. We're on the field, right? And perhaps the most obvious one is if you have a clinical case in your farm is the vesicle, right? That should be the very best one, the gold standard, right? But that's not always the case because you don't always have access to animals with the intact vesicles to get the fluid, right? So there are other sample types that you can use, such as oral swabs and rectal swabs, which are very easy to collect, and even tonsil swabs if you have access to a mouth speculum, right? So you just need to prop the mouth open, swab the tonsil, and it's also a very good one. And they should all be, if the animal is diseased, you should be able to detect it for up to 21 or 28 days usually. Oral swabs tend to go negative a little bit before, right? But not by much, right? And that's why also for this work that we published here that perhaps people have seen it in conferences, we decided to try to look into tonsil scrapings, which is the same type of sample that we use for classical swine fever monitoring, and then I believe some people also do it for PRRS, right? And then we found that you can actually find it for a lot longer, for at least up to 48 days, while all the other sample types turn negative. You can still detect it in the tonsils of the animals if you scrape the tonsil with a spoon. So it's very similar to when you're collecting a tonsil swab. You just grab a mouth speculum, and instead of swabbing the tonsil, you scrape it with a spoon, and then you just swab the spoon, and that's what you send to the lab for PCR, right? And the reason why we decided to go with that is because we knew that if you euthanize an animal or the animal dies, and then you just collect the whole tonsil and send it, we know that it can be positive for a very, very long time, sometimes even over 150 days. That's the most number of days that we have found to be positive so far. And then there are also other sample types. Oral fluids have been good too for up to 30, 35 days after the animals have been infected. Right now, we're going into the kind of aggregate sampling, right, group sampling. And processing fluids, you can also use them to detect. And processing fluids is actually pretty interesting because we found that even before you can detect the outbreak in your farm, right? So we have data from 10 different farms, and for a few of them, even before vesicles were seen, even before they knew that something was going on, we already detected positive processing fluids for up to 2 or 3 weeks before that. And in average, they stay positive for up to 12 weeks after the outbreak. And I believe, for live animals, that would be, the kind of samples that we do have. So
Very interesting. The tonsil swabs or tonsil scrapings are something that I think our audience is probably familiar with, but I would guess not a lot of us have actually collected those samples. You mentioned a speculum, and I think a lot of us do have experience with tracheal swabs for mycoplasma testing. That's become fairly common over the last decade. Is it the same type of speculum and same approach you would use, kind of the headlamp light to be able to see in there for collecting that tonsil swab is what we think of with the tracheal swabs? Is that fair to say you'd use some of the same equipment to collect that sample?
Yeah, myself, I used the exact same equipment, but I did not have any flashlight or anything. So because it's easier to see the tonsil, right? And I mean, in worst case scenario, even if you cannot see it, you kind of know where it is, and you can scrape, and you're gonna see the mucus, right?
Hmm.
Of course, I don't recommend that. It's better that you're looking at it, right? But I mean, if you have it, good. But if you don't have it, you can still make it.
Very good. Guilherme, you talked about some very long durations of potential infection with those tonsils, up to 150 days. That sounds like a situation where persistently infected animals could come up. Do we know much about that with Senecavirus A? Are there examples of herds that have been persistently infected, or individually animals that have been persistently infected? And do you know if that infection comes and goes, like a latent infection where the animal is positive, then negative for the antigen, but then goes positive again, or are they staying positive during that entire duration?
So that's a very interesting question, which we don't have a very good answer for it yet, right? So far, what we have found is, like I said, for up to 150 days after farm has gone through an outbreak, right? And then the animal, after we euthanize it, is still positive in tonsils, testicles of boars, and even some lymph nodes. You can find it, right? And so, is it a latent infection, or does the animal keep, shedding, and they stop shedding and then they resume shedding again? That kind of thing. It appears that stressful situations may trigger shedding again, right? Because we can consistently find that these animals are positive, or at least we find RNA over time when we keep sampling them. But if we do rectal swabs, or if we collect the feces to try to find it in there, we don't find it. But then there's even published literature showing that some stressors such as farrowing, transportation stress. After the authors have done that, they found that they were able to detect shedding again through rectal swabs, or that sort of sampling. So we don't have a very large number of animals, at least in the published literature, doing that, but we do have I'd say, a strong case that that may be happening, right? And then if you ask, is that virus live? Can it infect other animals? We have not proven that yet. Perhaps the strongest evidence that we do have that it probably is infectious, or that it may be infectious, is when we did in situ hybridization in tonsils of animals. And what is the in situ hybridization, or ISH? What it does, it's basically looking for replicating virus. And we have positive signals for that in tonsils of animals. So it seems like the virus is replicating. And if it is replicating, we can perhaps assume that it is live and it can infect others, right? We have not done, or we have not completed a bioassay yet, meaning that we haven't used the RNA found in the tonsils of persistently infected animals to try to infect others. But I mean, if we had recorded this 1 week from now, maybe I would have given you a different answer, because we are in the process of doing that. And so, yeah, soon we may know if the virus is live or not, if it can infect other animals or not. So,
Excellent. So you've got a bioassay prepared where you're taking that PCR positive material, intentionally exposing naive pigs to that, and we'll find out if that virus is live or not that way, correct?
yes, correct. And out of curiosity, I actually inoculated the animals with this material yesterday. So pretty soon, perhaps tomorrow, 2 days from now, I'm going to know the answer if these animals are positive or not.
Excellent. Well, enjoy your downtime away from other farms now that you've handled the Senecavirus A material. And I love to end on a teaser. So thank you very much for sharing that, Guilherme. We'll have to look forward to the second edition of this podcast to find out what those results look like. Thank you, Dr. Guilherme Preis, for coming on to the show today. Really appreciate your sharing your learnings with us. I think that's very practical information for producers and veterinarians alike that continue to battle infections with Senecavirus A. To everyone in our audience, thank you for listening to the Swine Health Black Belt podcast. Please visit us at swinehealthblackbelt.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on next week's episodes. For Dr. Guilherme Preis, a DVM and Ph.D. candidate at the University of Minnesota, my name's Dr. Clayton Johnson. Thank you, and see you next week. Hey, everyone. We're always searching for the latest and greatest research to share each week. If you have a swine health-related research trial and would like to come on the show to talk about it with me and share it with our audience, feel free to send an email to healthblackbelt@swineit.com, and we would love to take a look at your research.